Welcome to American History Lesson 23. Roosevelt's New Deal. Our lesson objectives are: identify the impact of President Roosevelt's actions in America's economic recovery and their lasting effects upon America. Identify the political actions that helped and hurt President Roosevelt. Identify how women and minorities impacted the social and political events of the time period. Identify the importance of cultural and entertainment's impact. President Roosevelt versus the Great Depression. In the 1932 election, President Delano Roosevelt, also called FDR, won a landslide victory, and Democrats took control of the House and Senate. His policies were called the New Deal. The first step was to reform banking because many banks were closing and causing panic. The new president tried to end the crisis by temporarily closing banks and passing a number of new laws. He reassured the nation in a series of radio announcements called fireside chats that explained his policies. Roosevelt acted to help farmers and other workers. The Agricultural Adjustment Act raised food prices. Roosevelt then created agencies to hire jobless workers for conservation or building projects. Another agency was created to help the needy. The National Industrial Recovery Act, NIRA, promoted industrial growth. The Tennessee Valley Authority brought flood control and electricity to poorer regions. The president's actions were attacked by liberals as not doing enough and by conservatives as too radical. When the Supreme Court overturned the NIRA and another New Deal law, Roosevelt proposed a plan to add his own justices to the court, but this failed. Eventually, the court backed the New Deal, but the court scheme cost him political support. Three critics of Roosevelt soon rose to prominence. Father Charles Coughlin blasted the president on his popular radio show. Dr. Francis Townsend proposed a national pension for the elderly. Huey Long, a politician from Louisiana, proclaimed a plan called Share Our Wealth. The economy began to improve, but not quick enough. Encouraged by Democratic gains in Congress, Roosevelt launched the Second New Deal in an effort to help the forgotten man. His wife Eleanor helped him maintain popularity. Roosevelt easily won re-election in 1936. The Supreme Court had struck down the first New Deal Act to help farmers. In the Second New Deal, Roosevelt won passage of new laws aimed at conserving oil, providing loans, and offering mortgage relief. A new agency, the Works Progress Administration, WPA, was established to fund projects that created jobs. Between 1935 and 1943, the WPA provided jobs to more than 8 million people. They built libraries, schools, and hospitals, fixed streets, and manufactured clothing. The Second New Deal tried to help workers by setting a national minimum wage, limiting the worker week, and requiring employers to pay overtime. The Wagner Act recognized workers' rights to organize unions. The Second New Deal set up the Social Security system. It made payments to retirees, disabled workers, and the unemployed and families with dependent children. Finally, the Second New Deal included the Rural Electrification Administration. It provided more electrical power in rural areas. Women and minorities during the New Deal. Women benefited from the New Deal as well. The newly created agencies did not discriminate in hiring, giving many women new opportunities. Roosevelt named the first female cabinet secretary, Frances Perkins, and appointed many women judges. Women still struggled against discrimination, however. Agencies and businesses did not hire women in proportion to their numbers in the population, and women continued earning lower wages than men. Mary McLeod Bethune, an African-American woman, became head of the Minority Affairs Office of a New Deal agency. She helped blacks gain access to the agency's programs and organized an unofficial black cabinet to advise the president. Roosevelt never pressed for full civil rights for African Americans, as he feared losing the political support of white Southerners. Despite this lack of vigorous support for civil rights, most African Americans backed him and the New Deal. Mexican Americans did too. Roosevelt's Commissioner of Indian Affairs helped pass the Indian Reorganization Act, strengthening Native American land claims. Roosevelt and the Democratic Party forged a new political coalition of Southern whites, urban voters, African Americans, and unionized workers. Labor was a key part of this coalition. New Deal laws made it easier for workers to organize. During the 1930s, union membership soared from 3 to more than 8 million. The United Mine Workers and United Auto Workers, with some other unions, split from the American Federation of Labor, AFL, to form a new group, the Congress of Industrial Organization, CIO. To win their demands, labor workers often had to strike, and these strikes sometimes resulted in violence. The entertainment industry during the New Deal. During the Depression, the radio and film industries flourished. About 90% of all households owned radios, and almost two-thirds of the population went to a movie once a week. The movies offered drama, comedies, and entertaining musicals. Hollywood became identified with glamour and sophistication. Families typically gathered by their radio each evening to hear their favorite shows. President Roosevelt addressed the nation in his fireside chats on several occasions. The art and literature of the 1930s was more serious, offering serious critiques of American society or uplifting messages about the strength of character and values of the people. One branch of the WPA, the Federal Arts Project, paid artists to create posters, murals, and other public works of art. The Federal Theater Project brought drama to communities across the country. Some writers had work funded by the Federal Writers Project. A famous author of the period was John Steinbeck. His novel, The Grapes of Wrath, showed the suffering caused by the Dust Bowl. In the last years of the 1930s, the economy had recovered somewhat. Industrial production had reached 1929 levels. Unemployment was still high, but was much less than earlier in the decade. Many politicians pushed Roosevelt to cut back on New Deal programs. He did, and the economy slumped back again. However, Roosevelt did not restore the New Deal. Opinion on the New Deal still differs. Conservatives say that under Roosevelt, the federal government grew too large and extended into everyday life. Liberals say that the New Deal didn't go far enough in restructuring the economy and wealth. Supporters say that Roosevelt managed a balance between preserving the existing economic system and reforming it. The lasting impact of President Roosevelt's New Deal. The New Deal did result in expanding power for the federal government. It relieved the suffering of many people struggling during the Depression's harshest years. It boosted the rights of workers to unionize and aided farmers by creating a program of price support that remained in effect for decades. Many banking and finance reforms begun under the New Deal are still in action. Perhaps the longest-standing New Deal programs are Social Security and the creation of the Tennessee Valley Authority. Fun fact: as a boy, FDR met President Grover Cleveland, who told him, "My little man, I am making a strange wish for you. It is that you may never be President of the United States." Later, when speaking in Cleveland during his campaign for a third term, FDR assured his audience that when the next 4 years are over, there will be another president. There were loud shouts of no from the crowd, but FDR thrust his bell close to the microphone and went right on talking so that the shouts, which suggested that he be elected permanently, would not be overheard over the radio. What next? Take the time to go back and review the lesson on your own. After your review, complete the lesson review for the lesson and submit for grading. Remember, your submission should follow all the rules for standard written English. All submissions must be written in your own words and sources used cited at the end. How to cite sources in APA format. When you reference a source within an APA-style paper, whether it is using a direct quote, repurposing an image, or simply referring to an idea or theory, you should insert an in-text citation, the author's surname and the date of publication within parentheses, straight after a direct quote. CitationMachine.net will assist you in creating citations.